what is your favorite part about teaching Vanderbilt Law students?
So, I mean, the students and the teaching mission of the school really what drew me to the law school. And I mean, in terms of my favorite part about teaching the law students, I don't know, it's hard to choose just one thing. I find the students, have this incredible wealth of life experience. Students are tenacious about the kind of cases that we're working intently on, but also curious about really the connections, not just among cases, but to much bigger questions, including questions about equity and justice. And I've also found that we're not an enormously large law school, and the scale of it means that students know the faculty really well, the faculty know the students really well, and the students know each other well, and they really care about each other. And I certainly see that in all kinds of conversations that I have with students individually and in groups, and I feel like that kind of community has really made this nightmare of a year something that we've all been able to get through together, and I'm very grateful to the students for that.
Yeah, I have a feeling I'm going to be doing a lot of like what he said or what she said, but one of the reasons that I chose Vanderbilt to teach is that I was very serious about teaching, but also very serious about my scholarship, as I know is true of Dan and of Yesha as well. And this was a place just where I knew that I'd be held to the highest standards of both, and that I would be called to continue to be better than I was when I walked in, or better than the year before. And that has definitely been true for me. And if any of y'all are interested in legal scholarship, there's a lot of opportunities to also get involved with us as our research assistants as part of like the Vanderbilt Legal Scholars Program, and to get exposed to really groundbreaking research efforts to try to make the law in the world a little bit more in sync. So that's been really important for me. Everything that Professor Sharfstein said about the students, I always think one of my taglines for our student community is everybody's smart and nice. And I've been at many institutions where, you don't always get that magic combination, but there's a pleasantness and a niceness to our community, even as people are, sort of honing that discipline mindset and holding ourselves and each other to account, and to keep thinking in more sharp and disciplined ways, including about very hard topics, but without being mean to each other. And that's been very meaningful to me.
Yeah, I will exactly, what Dan and Terry said. I will say that, law school can suck. Law school is incredibly hard. Law school is incredibly intimidating. When you walk in, you feel like you're the person that knows the least, and there are all these other gunners everywhere chatting up a storm, and you're like, what the hell are they talking about? What the professor's saying? And all of that stuff, is part and parcel of the law school experience. So that is it. It is a hard, intense time in which you're going to grow up like crazy. And I just think it's good to do it in a place which doesn't make it feel as terrible, honestly. I think, when you're going to go to law school, it's hard enough as it is. I think there's something to be said for learning in an environment that's supportive, that is that helps you to feel and to be as much of yourself as you feel comfortable being, to follow the kinds of paths and pursuits you want, and not to be judged. I think there's a beauty to the community which comes from a degree of self-acceptance and accepting each other, and having a civility that allows you to be who you are. and not be judged, but at the same time to maintain that cordiality amongst the community. That's part of the values that we have. And you're going to have all of your life to be in that crazy world that we know is a crazy, hard, difficult, wonderful, exciting, adventurous world. I think being in a law school space that's a little less edged, but that allows you to just kind of flower in different ways. I kind of like that, and that's why I love Vanderbilt. So for me, as I would apply that not as a student but as a professor. I came from this non-academic background completely. I had no fellowship, nothing. I came from a different country, a different norm. And I have been so welcomed here by my professors, the other professors. They literally taught me to be an academic. They taught me how to teach. They took that patience. So many different professors here, even those who don't do corporate law and business. And I get to be who I am completely. I turn up to work. I can't show up in the morning because I'm not a morning person. I swear a lot. I can, I run around, saying things and, just running down the corridors and stuff. And no one minds it. They're kind and they're decent and I love it and I can feel at home. And so it's
She
just
also likes to sit in the dark. Why are your lights always off in your office?
Lights off. I turn to dust in the morning, so that's not going to happen.
I'm about to ask the next prepared question, but one thing that we forgot to mention is if you do have any questions that come up throughout, please feel to direct message me, and I'll hold all of those and ask those for you at the end. So our next question is, what does diversity and inclusion mean to you, and how is it represented in the community at Vanderbilt?
I'll take a preliminary run at that. And I've been involved in sort of all of the official diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives that have happened in the law school, but also at the university level. And so I've had a lot of time to sit with those terms, and especially as lawyers or budding lawyers, you're always taught to think that there should be no surplusage. Like each of those things should mean something different, like diversity, equity, and inclusion, or diversity, equity, community. So I think for me, diversity at the law school has meant just literally being able to feel that I'm part of the kind of diverse community that has always kept me going in my life, being around people who with a variety of different backgrounds, from different viewpoints, different identifications in terms of race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation. Just being able to, especially because I lived my entire adult life in New York City and then in Los Angeles, I was worried about coming to a place like this. I grew up in the South. I grew up in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And I was like, I sure hope the South has changed. I hope Nashville's different. And I've been really happy here because I have been able to look around and feel part of a diverse community, both in the law school, but also in the university and also in Nashville. Happy to answer questions about that. In terms of equity or equality, to me, that has a different flavor of, given a diverse community, to what degree is everybody within this community treated with equal respect and given equal chances to learn and to shine, or to be weak, or to need help, or whatever, right? And then in the inclusion, to me, which is always been a little bit more of the enigma, but how I've come to think about it is, and do we have agency? Like, do we all have agency in what our community feels like, how it runs, what the rules are? And at the law school, especially with Dean Yadav's position, we've chosen to use the word community instead of inclusion, but I think it gets at the same thing. Like, are we all part of the community, not just because we happen to be there, but because we play a role in its how it is constituted and how it's run? So that's my hyper technical textualist read of diversity, equity, and inclusion / community.
I mean, I think that's a beautiful answer. For me, I've never liked being in a place where everyone tells the same story and everyone has the same answers. Diversity for me is involves a community that experiences the world and sees the world in different ways, that represents our world in different ways, and that's committed to making our differences our great strength. I find it's represented for me in the courses that I teach, and also in just the work that we do in the world. As co-director of the George Barrett program, which Terry was my partner in crime for many years. In the Barrett program, it was our belief that the best way to become a public interest lawyer, the Barrett program is committed to training public interest lawyers and also building the capacity for students who are going into private law to make public interest work a meaningful part of their careers. The best way to become a public interest lawyer is to do public interest law. So through the Barrett program, we foster all kinds of experiences, and we work closely with law students for social justice and also with our assistant dean for public interest, Spring Miller. We're fostering experiences, we're providing professional opportunities that really create lawyers who want to make real their commitment to contributing to and building a society where we all have access to justice and we can all claim to belong.
I love that. And to just fantastic responses, and I'm not sure what more I can add. The goal essentially since of my position is really to try and focus on building a community where really the idea is that folks can feel at home, that when they come here, they feel, as Dan said, they can tell their story, they can be who they want, they don't have to feel intimidated, or they don't have to feel like this has to be any harder than it already is. So this is a place where you are free to be you. And obviously, we've had a hard year. There's no denying the fact that we've had to deal with some extreme, well, not just had to, are dealing with extremely complicated, horrible issues, and making folks in the community feel safe and respected and doing the work that we need to do to ensure that they're seen is a work in progress. It always is. And so, following the summer's events, we have worked we are trying to work, and it's a work in progress. It's a continuing dialogue to make sure that our minority students, our Black students, feel completely safe, that they feel like they have the opportunities, that they feel like they have the voice to be able to completely express exactly how they feel at this point in time, and make sure that they are protected from the horrors of the outside world. So really, that's a challenge to us. And so we are meeting that challenge from the curricular perspective, from the community perspective. And obviously now with the anti-Asian violence, we have a role to play in ensuring that our Asian students feel protected and seen and completely safe within the community, that this is a community that will protect them against the evil that we're seeing in this outside world. So that is an ongoing work in progress, and increasingly the law school and higher education has a role to play to making sure that folks who are part of the community are able to feel at home, able to feel safe, able to express themselves, and able to make the most of the opportunities that are presented to them in their places of higher education. And we're trying enormously to make sure that's a reality here.
Thank you so much for those responses. I think that really sets the stage going forward for this event. So thank you for that. The next question we have is, we've touched on this a little bit, so feel free to add more pieces if you feel like there is more to add. But how would you describe the culture of the Vanderbilt community here?
So I'll take again a first run at that. So I think we've already said a lot of those things. So let me say something that kind of touches on the hard parts that Dean Yadav just talked about. So, you know, the baseline to me is very clear. This is a very inclusive, warm, supportive community. Like that. That said, you know, we are, you know, we're not a bubble from the outside world, and things that happen in the outside world happen to all of us and happen inside the walls, and we have conflicts and we're not perfect. And so for me, a big part of what's important about the Vanderbilt community is a willingness to face those things. So one concrete thing that we did last summer after the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery and all of the issues that sparked for all of us is the dean appointed various task forces, faculty, staff, and student task forces, to basically take a really hard look at, like, how are we doing? Like, are we creating a supportive community for everybody, faculty, staff, students? Like, what could we be doing better? Where are we, what things are frustrating people, what things feel like continuations or perpetuations of some of the injustices to which we're all reacting. So, you know, I was, along with quite a lot of other people at the faculty, staff, and student levels, you know, it played a large role in that. We did a big survey of faculty, staff, and students, spent a lot of time over the summer, like crunching, you know, the meaning of the survey data, and issued reports. And now we're in the hard work of implementing. You know, one concrete thing that's come out of it is Dean Yadav's position. We said essentially we need somebody who's very highly regarded in our community, who's very in touch with these issues, to sort of be the buck stops here person, like, and to run point. I'm going to start using all sorts of like crazy mixed up metaphors, you know, but to essentially to make sure that somebody's always, here comes another metaphor, got their eye on the ball, right? For these issues within our community, so that there can never be a dispersion of authority, or, well, I thought you were looking at that, I thought you were looking at that. And other concrete things we've done, you know, like instituting the anti-racism book club, which has been really fun, actually. I think this year has been great. Looking for ways to really build out the explicitly anti-racist and pro-equity and diversity and inclusion aspects of our curriculum, but also looking for ways to support and faculty and learning to figure out how to weave those issues seamlessly into our existing curriculum, because that's where it also belongs. So I don't want to sit here and just be like, oh, we're the best ever, right? You know, because you know, we are where we are, right? But I think that one thing that I really love about this community is there was never a moment of like, let's just pretend everything's okay and like it's everybody else in the world's problem. It was a really serious, like, part of being a leader for these issues in the world is being a leader with ourselves internally, and let's look at it and let's be honest. So there's that. It's a work in progress, but I think it's a super important indicator of the kind of community we are.
You know, the work Terry has done and Yesha has done, you know, since the summer, it has been incredibly impressive to me. You know, in terms of describing the culture of the law school community, I mean, if I had to do that, I would, you know, one thing I would say, and I think this is part of the process that, you know, we've been working through since the summer. I feel like people here can talk to each other and listen to each other in a very open and transparent and down-to-earth way. And I feel like, there are places where, I've sort of taught and perched before I taught, where I feel like, people were so blinded by the assignment that they had right in front of them, that it was like they didn't exist in the world. So I've always felt like, I've always been very impressed by how the students have, always been able to communicate with each other and with us very, very effectively. And so, I feel like that has really, worked for us, right? As, we're, doing some, having some tough conversations, over the past few months, but also, on a much longer horizon.
Yeah, and I think I would just add one more thing to that, which is the effort that I think everyone puts in to try and not make interactions overly formal and overly rigid. So, we can have dialogues quite fluidly between professors and students, and I think that's helpful for a number of reasons. If you're coming from, at least in my experience, communities of color, there is a these are complex spaces to navigate when you enter the professional world and you enter a world like a law school, which you might traditionally, I guess, regard it as a, historically a white space, and you do have to learn skills to navigate these spaces. And it helps, I think, to have the ability to interact in a friendly, collegial, informal way with your professors. I think that teaches you to speak it teaches you what your voice sounds like, helps you to develop those soft skills that become very useful in the workplace, and gives you the confidence over time, as well as the experience, I think, to come into and get comfortable with professional, historically white spaces in which you are now, in which you are now a part of, and excelling and flourishing and finding your own space within. And so the one good thing that I've found at Vandy is the non-intimidating aspect of communicating with professors, which I think has good positive knock-on effects, particularly if you haven't come from experiences like I hadn't, in which you're used to always talking to fancy professionals and fancy folks. I felt very intimidated. I didn't want to speak. I didn't want to do any of those things. But it's good when you can talk to your professors, learn from them, gain experience, gain confidence, and find a voice. I think it's really cool. And so that's a positive part of the culture, at least for me.
Yeah, the culture is so approachable. I think, like my students know both of my dogs' names, and they are very, especially in Zoom land, they're very upset if I don't show them the dogs, like during every class. And I'll show up to office hours, especially this year, like in a hoodie. And, so again, I think it has a really nice effect, I think, on the, the approachability, that, we're not trying to sort of like stand on high and deliver knowledge to you. We're co-constructing understandings and learnings together, sometimes in a hoodie and sometimes with a puppy on the lap.
Thank you so much for the responses so far. We do want to take some time to open up the floor to questions from you all. If you have any burning questions or thoughts that have come up while these faculty have been speaking, please feel free to unmute yourselves and speak them out loud if you want to.
Professor Sharfstein also often teaches one else in property. Dan, you teach in the property in the first semester. usually, or it kind of varies, right? Second?
It varies. This year is the first semester, as Rohit can attest, but usually it's in the second semester.
Yeah, so criminal law, which I teach, is always in the second semester for various reasons. It makes most sense pedagogically once students have had particular classes in the fall. So I'm often not there for, the part of the 1L year that's the like, my God, what have I done? And what is this thing? And how is it that I am meant to study? So I usually, by the time I get the students, and Dan, I'm sure this is true for you as well, people are fairly well cultivated to the, like, this is the rhythm of things. This is the wildly different way I'm being encouraged to learn to read. This is sort of what this famed Socratic method actually looks like, which is, often a little bit more, bark than bite. But I think that I really appreciate the question, because the first year really is a transformational year in everyone's life in some way or another. Like there's no way to overstate that. I think it is a transformational year because you are becoming one kind of thinker. You're coming in as one type of thinker, and you're becoming a rather different one by the end of the year. And so I think that intellectually that's very challenging, but the part I think about most, like Dean Yadav mentioned, that I researched the role of emotion in law and decision making. I think a lot of it is difficult emotionally, and what I see on that end of things is people just being like, who am I? Like, am I being changed by this experience in ways that might make me not the person I thought I was? Or I came in, there's this phenomenon called public interest drift that we actually just had a really good panel on earlier this week. So somebody might come in saying, I really want to be a civil rights attorney. And then by middle of the second semester, first year, they're like, somehow I'm getting the message that I'm supposed to be a corporate associate doing mergers and acquisitions, and I don't even know what those are. Right. So I feel like I feel like it's that emotional piece, like learning to dive into this world, this weird legal world with its own rules and own conventions, and love it and dedicate yourself to the discipline of it while hanging on to who you are. Right. So I feel like it's a hanging on to the important parts of who you are, right? Being willing to change, but not be fundamentally changed at the level of values and commitments. I feel like that's hard for people. I'm going to stop talking for a second. Dan, what do you have to add to that?
Yeah, so I'm based on my first semester teaching experiences. I would say, there's an element of it that is like language acquisition, right? And some people, acquire faster, other people learn at a different pace, right? And that can be kind of stressful, to figure out, and there's no one right way to gain that facility with legal language and legal concepts. So, part of it is just being patient with yourself and knowing that, you'll get there. And it's our job to help you get there. And then there's you're sitting in a large room with in front of your peers. You have to speak, and it feels like you're being judged by the professor, you're being judged by your classmates, and when you're first speaking, when a professor is peppering you with questions, it's very gentle peppering. For the most part, I would say, when you first start speaking in class, it's kind of an out-of-body experience. I remember vividly being asked questions and just kind of looking down and watching myself, flounder in class. And, over time, I feel like, you become more embodied and can just kind of be present in the moment and have a conversation about these legal concepts. It's also about reading, right? So you're learning how to talk, you're also learning how to read. And you have a lot of reading, you have to learn how to read efficiently. You have to, a lot of the reading seems like it's, it's like Harry Potter magic words, and you're trying to decode what you're reading. So, that's also something that you just have to be patient with, and really, let the professors are here to help you. And then it's also, you're in a new place. You may not know many people, and part of learning is, finding your community, finding study groups, finding people you can talk about this stuff with and practice the language with, and finding support groups. And from there, the first semester is a very narrow, kind of introspective experience, because you're just trying to, assimilate all these different concepts. But then, there's the bigger issue of figuring out what lawyers do all day, right? And realizing that law school is really 2.5 years, right? We say it's 3 years, but it's like 2.5 years. And then there's the rest of your life, stretching ahead of you. I think about my grandfather, graduated from law school at 24, and then he died at 91 and had a client meeting scheduled for the next day, right? And you think 67 years is a lot longer than 2.5 years. And, you're trying to figure out, what makes for a rewarding and sustainable, meaningful career.
Yeah, I just have to introduce my co-pilot here. This is Freedom. Hey, buddy. He likes to sit on my lap while I do Zooms. And actually, I kind of want to hear, Rohi, what you have to say about this. Because one thing that I really like to cultivate in my 1Ls to the extent I can is just the joy of it. And I think that, of course, law school is hard. Of course, you work like crazy. Of course, you come in thinking, I know how to talk, I know how to read. But as Dan has said, you have to learn these new ways. Everybody around you is every bit as smart and accomplished as you are, right? All those things are true, but it's just when I was a 1L, I felt like I had, and I no lawyers in my family, I had no clue, right? And I just felt like I discovered a language I didn't know I needed. Like, I just felt like my brain cracked open and I was like, oh, that's how I think. Look at that. There's a whole world that fits so, with me and the way I think. And I still feel that way, right? So I think that one of the greatest things about the 1L year when you encounter those moments of joy. So yeah, but Mr. Murty, what do you think people are going through in their 1L? We often call them by students by their last names. I don't usually, but what do you think about this question?
I totally agree with pretty much everything both of you said. It getting called on initially, your mind typically just kind of goes blank, and then slowly stuff sort of starts to come back in. For me, law school was a bit of a different experience, just because my background was pretty science heavy coming in. So I was a chemistry major. I went to grad school. I taught high school science for a couple of years, and then the classroom was flipped for me. Now, I wasn't standing at the front of the room. I was a student. I was getting asked questions, and I had to learn to read really dense cases and pick them apart. And I think the first semester really teaches you how to do that. And now, you have one more class in your second semester, but somehow the reading is easier than when you only had 3 the first time. And you're able to get through more and sort of feel like you understand it a little bit more than you did the first time or your first semester. But yeah, it's definitely like you said, it's sort of like learning a new language too. And
one thing I would just add before we do move on is that there are a lot of resources for 1Ls in terms of mentorship, in terms of buddies, in terms of partners, and legal research and writing groups and so on that are designed to provide support to deal with the fact this is a completely new and crazy and hardcore and weirdly exhilarating but exhausting environment to be in, particularly in your first semester. So there are we're not blind to these things. We're perfectly aware of them, and we want everyone to succeed. So our fabulous dean of students, Chris Myers, and others put together resources to support mental health, to support community building, to support networking. These are things that are important, essential, especially mental health. And so, it's a focus. And I don't know, Rohit, whether you found that helpful, but it's definitely part of something that we value in that 1L semester.
Thanks, Yesha. Does anyone have any other questions in the moment that they would like to ask our faculty members?
All the wonderful things about living in this place, the Tennessee state legislature is not high on the list, right? And fortunately, they're never in session for very long. But boy, when they go into session, you start holding your breath to be like, what the heck is going to happen this time? And this is what is one of the many things that's happening this time, and it sucks. It really, really sucks. So I think that certainly in the time that I've been here, I love the way you're talking about uplifting like the LGBTQ community here, and that has wildly expanded in my time. So clearly in the law school, we have a very active community. We have a very active outlaw chapter, and students are very actively working to uplift each other. But this is a moment where I think being embedded in a really wonderful university is important, because the LGBTQ community on campus is so strong, and all of our students, we're part of this big university that has all these fora and panels and resources and a community center and all that kind of stuff. So does it make it? It does not, to my mind, and again, I'm a queer person who's lived here for 15 years, so it doesn't make it better that Tennessee politically, especially the state legislature, kind of sucks so bad. But also ask, like, would I still be here? Like, would I still be here if I weren't in such a beautiful bubble? So I wish I had a better answer, like, oh no, they didn't really mean it. It doesn't really affect our lives here in Tennessee. They mean it, and it does, right? And it's not just queer stuff, like we have I'm sure many of you have heard, we still have a bust of like Nathan Bedford Forrest, the founder of the Klan, like in the state capitol. It's just, so that we're also, and Dan is literally an expert in this, we have this incredibly proud, vibrant history of activism and resistance in Nashville. So I don't know, if you like to be where things matter, sometimes I think about it like, I would hate to say I'm a dime a dozen in New York or San Francisco, but maybe I'm a dime a dozen here. I feel like I matter more, and my presence matters more. It matters more politically, it matters more to my students. They matter more to me. It kind of keeps my eye on the ball again of like what is still at stake than if I still lived in one of my bubbles like I did in New York and when I lived in LA and San Francisco. So Dan, I see you want to weigh in on this too. So thank you for the question, Blake. Sorry to go on so long.
No, it's a great question. When I think about our legislature, I feel like there's a lot of hand wringing about virtue signaling, but I feel like our legislature is the opposite. It's malice signaling, right? And every year, there's something, more than one thing that, makes you want to pull your hair out. The thing about, we're part of Vanderbilt's community, and that's a wonderful community. There's also, Nashville is, a really important community that in many ways, exists on a very different frequency from our legislature, right? And it's a place that I've found, is, progressive at a grassroots level, and also very open to anyone who wants to be involved, right? And so again, it's sort of just like, we benefit from our kind of intimate scale at the law school. I feel like Nashville, the size of it, it's big, so lots of interesting things are happening. There are lots of interesting people and issues, but it's also small enough that if you want to be involved, you can be involved. So there is a hearing to remove the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest at the Capitol, and I showed up for the public comments and talked for my 3 minutes alongside all kinds of really different and really interesting people, and we got a 25-to-1 vote from the Historical Commission to remove it, which we're hoping now we need just the legislature to get out of session before it can kind of grab on to that statue. So I feel like if you want to be involved in a place that has a really important progressive tradition, right, but is also really open for people to be active, this is a great place for that.
So I'll just add one more thing to these terrific comments, which is, and thank you for that question, Blake. It's a really important question. The one thing that we do have is a university that's deeply committed to LGBTQIA representation and to rights and to trans rights. That's really, really important. It is not ignored. There is a very, very vibrant community on campus. And I can just give you an example. So earlier this semester, I was approached, I was approached about whether the university's insurance is geared up to cover top surgery, for example. And so we've been working with the university's Senate to make sure that our insurance brokers and our medical insurance is geared up to ensure that our trans students have the ability to undertake gender affirming surgery and not have to worry about the insurance aspects of it or litigation, because in some cases there is litigation to validate the Supreme Court's rulings about anti-discrimination in this context. So we're trying to proactively ensure that these things are taken care of so that our trans students don't have to have that extra mental stress of having to worry about medical bills and so on and so forth. So there was, when I raised it with the university and the Senate, there was literally no one who batted an eyelid. Like, the immediate response was, let's try and figure it out. If there is a gap in the insurance, we need to try and fix it. So our university is extremely progressive, in those, and absolutely committed to ensuring that LGBTQ representation and rights are vindicated at all costs.
Our next question is, what are the ways in which you advance social justice through the classes you teach?
I feel like I should go here because I teach corporate law, and therefore you might assume that there's literally no social justice involved, because my Terry and Dan are part of the social justice community proper, as it were, and I teach like financial regulation and securities regulation. But the goal, I think, increasingly is to ensure that we all are tackling anti-racism, social justice, discrimination, civil rights as part of all of our courses. And you know what? It comes up a lot in SecReg, in securities markets, like who gets access to investments, intergenerational wealth issues, making sure that capital, that consumers are not screwed over by banks, and always the first people to get screwed over first are the Black and brown consumers. So it's coming up, and the goal now is to try and Thank you, Terry, for that. And the goal, I just assume, and the goal is now to get professors across the board, including for subjects that may not appear on their face of it social justice orientated, to try and bring issues into these have these conversations. And I think that's working out. I think we are doing that. So now it's over to the social justice faculty.
I mean, in criminal law, everything, I think criminal law is really where the rubber meets the road in terms of how we treat one another. I don't think there's anything more basic than how we treat one another in the criminal justice system. So I do my best, and I, don't always meet my own standards, but I do my best to try to weave those issues literally, just not like here's the rule and let's think about how this might apply to this, but like literally to integrate as best I can issues of justice and equality and fairness and anti-racism into how we learn the material. So this year, for example, we're studying the law of varying grades of homicide by looking literally at the homicide charges against former police officer Derek Chauvin for killing George Floyd. Like, it's not sort of here's the rules and now let's apply that to George Floyd. It's basically like, let's learn these rules through George Floyd and Derek Chauvin. So, and with my upper level classes, actual innocence and juvenile justice, again, I can't even imagine how one would teach those classes without advancing those ideals. It's probably much more obvious how to do that. But Dan, sorry to cut you off. Go for it.
No. Yeah, so I teach property, and so much about property is about who belongs, right, and who doesn't belong. So much about property is about who wields power and whose voices get heard. And owning land, which is really what my property course is about. There is so much policy built around very particularized versions of owning land that has it's kind of our infrastructure of inequality, right? It's the racial wealth gap is a function of property law to a very large degree. And there's been a tremendous amount of law around housing segregation. And despite all of that law, despite 70 plus years of really aggressive effort to try and root out housing segregation, with a keen understanding of how that skews race in so many different areas of American society, we remain remarkably segregated in our housing. So I mean, maybe Rohit, you were there in the first semester. I think I definitely tried to weave a lot of that into the class, but if you disagree, just go like that. Then in my other classes, I teach a seminar on the legal history of race in the U.S., which really focuses on topics in the legal history of slavery, Jim Crow, and civil rights. I also teach federal Indian law, which is really and you really see the legacy of colonialism in the U.S. Kind of writ large, and how tribes have been able to retain sovereignty despite tremendous acts of dispossession. So my classes, I feel like if you're interested in these issues, we'll have a lot to talk about.
I'd just like to chime in and say, yeah, Professor Sharfstein's class was fantastic. From day one, he tied social justice, racial justice through the through the whole sort of web of property throughout the whole semester. And I've heard wonderful things about Professor Maroney and Dean Yadav's classes as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rohit. The check's in the mail.
Thank you for those responses, professors. Another important question that we wanted to ask was, where do you feel like Vanderbilt Law School has made the biggest improvements regarding diversity and inclusion? And where do you feel like it needs to make more progress?
I feel like I'm going to force Yesha to take that one first. What do you think, Yesh?
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously, over the summer when, as Professor Maroney said, we did that survey, numerous areas of concern emerged. For example, in relation to representation on journals, making sure that we have enough curricular offerings to effectively teach and educate about race in the law, making sure that our faculty is diverse and representative. So these are real concerns that we need to address. And the best part is that we've been working on them in a systematic way. This year, for example, we have included, authorized the inclusion of a personal statement as part of journal selection, as requested by the 3 Vanderbilt journals. We are, trying to broaden our social justice scholarly offerings here. We are trying to build in more curricular offerings, and of course, trying to make sure that our faculty looks and represents the best, most excellent faculty anywhere in the country, as well as being a super diverse faculty. So we are making those efforts, but obviously those are works in progress. I think the most important thing to know, at least in my experience when proposing things to the administration, is just how completely supportive Dean Guthrie is, how completely supportive everyone is. And I might have this dean's role, but honestly, it's a gigantic team effort. There is not a single soul in the building that is not helping. And so, Professor Maroney, Professor Sharfstein, they've contribute all the time to things that are coming out of this new office. We have the alumni office that contributes, the dean of students, everyone working together to do this. So it really is a team effort. We're trying to remedy the problems that were identified. We are not blind to the fact that no institution is perfect and wonderful and whatever, but we are committed to making changes because these changes need to be made.
I want to chime in. I think that faculty, like literal faculty diversification, I think is one of our weak spots. I think it would be hard to deny that. I think, that clearly that is something that the students have noticed and felt, and I have noticed and felt, right? It actually has gotten quite a bit better on a number of levels since I got here. But I do want to mark that as an area where growth is needed, and the institution knows it and is working very actively on it. I think that one of the areas where progress has really, really been made is a tremendous diversification of our curricular offerings. And I mean, just like exponential growth in the different kinds of classes that people can take that reflect a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different ways of getting at issues of diversity, inclusion, and inequality as expressed through law. So mindful of the time, I will leave it at that for now.
Yeah, I agree very much with Terry. And in terms of faculty diversity, I mean, it's something that is, at the very front of a lot of our minds every year. And it's about diversity, and it's about critical mass. And so it's a project for, that's not just for 1 year. It's really something that is for every year.
Thank you so much for those responses. Rohit, should we ask maybe one more question, and then we could turn back to the audience for final burning questions?
Sure. For our last question, how are students who identify as minority welcomed and celebrated at Vanderbilt?
without treading, a lot of ground that we've tread already, I think it's a great moment to talk about our vibrant student organizations as well, which, I should have put that really on one of my lists of things that I love most about Vanderbilt Law School. I've been the faculty advisor to the La Alianza, which is the Latinx affinity group, for a long, long time. That's an area where there's been a lot of growth, where I showed up here 15 years ago and I'm like, I'm sorry, we're all the Latino students, we're all the other Latino faculty members. And I have to say it's gotten, radically better since then. We have a really wonderful community within La Alianza. But we have, I feel like the student affinity groups are really at the heart of a lot of the cool stuff that happens in our community. So I want to just give them a big shout out in terms of, just from the very beginning, just saying like, if having this kind of affinity group is useful to you, if this is important to you, here we are, and we do activities and we sponsor events. I mean, this year, again, everything's been just like nutso because this year, right? But somehow the organizations have managed to keep things going. It'll be better next year because we'll be able to have more fun with it. Like the tradition that I really miss in the pandemic year has been what we call Blackacre, which is these Friday afternoon, just essentially social hours. We didn't have this when I was in law school, and now I'm like, why? Like, it's just the best thing. It's like at 4 or 5 o'clock on a Friday, like the whole center part of the law school sort of just becomes a hangout zone, and there's food and there's drinks and there's often programs. Sometimes there's music, and the student affinity groups are very, very active in running those. Like the groups get to claim like, okay, we're in charge of Blackacre for this day, and then it'll have this theme or whatever. And it may sound like a small thing, but it's actually really, it's really great. Just in terms of making everyone feel welcome, but also just giving each affinity group a chance to kind of own the space in a very vivid way that's also inclusive and fun.
Yeah, seconding.
Sorry, Dan, go for it.
No, Yesha, do you want to speak, please?
No, I just wanted to say that from the institutional standpoint, as Terry mentioned, we have the affinity groups, and they're great. We also have the EDI Council, which is a kind of governing org for all the affinity groups, and that represents the groups with the administration. And so a lot of initiatives go with the Vanderbilt Bar Association and the EDI, which are two very, very active organizations in promoting the welfare of our minority students. In addition, we have a number of initiatives that are coming up. For example, a mentorship program for underrepresented students that ties 2Ls and 3Ls to alumni that have their interests as a way to guide them through law school as well as afterwards, obviously. And so that program took off this year. We have a new mentorship program, One Elevate, that's designed to bring in and encourage underrepresented kids from students from underrepresented communities, and to really develop their leadership skills, to really identify future leaders, and to do a systematized program of mentoring and leadership building in their first year. So these are all initiatives that are being developed to ensure that our students feel represented vis-a-vis the administration, and also that their careers and other aspirations are fully realizable in a tangible way.
So it's hard to top that. I would just add that the affinity group that I've worked with the most is the Black Law Students Association, and for my entire time here, I found it an incredibly impressive community. Very supportive, very empowered within Vanderbilt, and I think that there are many groups like this that have a real voice in constituting what our community is, and what we exist to do in the world. I'd also say, in terms of welcoming and celebrating our students who identify as minority, there are many ways that law school can feel isolating and difficult, and I think that the students themselves foster a very warm community, and then I also think that we professors are not we're here to serve the students. When we're not battling a virus, I'm in my office and my door is open, and I am here to engage with you and listen. So thanks.
Yeah, me too. And I know for sure Dean Yadav too, that when you look in her open door, you'll see that she has the lights off.
It's all dark, yo.
Just saying.
But there's chocolate in there if you come and look,
Yeah, that is also true. And there's almost always a group of students in there sitting in the dark, just having great conversations, eating their chocolate.
The glow of blue light.
Yeah.
So we have 10 minutes left. Are there any questions from the audience? You're welcome to unmute yourself and ask them.
I'll take it. Yeah, so I moved here after living many years in Los Angeles and in Boston, and then a very brief jaunt in Tallahassee, where I don't know, I bought meat from a place that also had a thriving taxidermy business, and I found Nashville, in many ways, it's a really easy and manageable place to live. For me, I can walk to work. I'm hardly ever in my car more than 10 minutes, which, after living in Los Angeles, feels unbelievable. And as a result of kind of the scale of the city, I feel like I can work more, I can spend more time with my family, I can get to know my neighbors pretty well. I feel like, in many ways, it's, there's just kind of more of everything that is accessible to you.
Yeah, I feel very similarly, having moved from, New York and Los Angeles. I had this, light bulb moment a few months into my time here where I was like, oh my God, I have like 3 extra hours a day, like that I wasn't spending like schlepping myself and my things from place to place. It was astounding. So for me, this has been a really ideal place to be during the pandemic because I have a house and a yard and a porch and neighbors. And so isolation has not been quite so brutal on me and a lot of the folks I know as it has been for a lot of my friends in New York. So it's a place that I can walk to stuff. I've never not been able to keep going outside. And so that's been very helpful. I think, I'd be curious, the student perspective on this. I do have kind of a bizarre window into this though, which is this year I hosted a Swedish doctoral student for this international research project I'm on, and she and her partner showed up like the day before they shut all travel from Europe, and then they had to quarantine for 2 weeks in like the residence inn, and then they like were in this kind of random apartment building with no car, and the end. So I was like, oh no, Nashville's kind of a terrible place for these young Swedish people to be during this pandemic. And they ended up having a really great time. The key was they moved to one of our awesome neighborhoods. They moved to Germantown. that's really the key. It's like, just be a place where you can get out of your apartment building or your house and be somewhere cool where you can walk around. And, the very ingenious entrepreneurs have figured out how to still sell you a good cup of coffee, even though you can't go in anywhere. And there's parks and places to walk your dog. And, Nashville, again, is not Tennessee. Nashville has actually had an extremely sensible response to the pandemic, which has helped. So I actually just got a WhatsApp from her yesterday. She's back in Stockholm, and she's just like, we are really, really missing Nashville, and we can't wait to come back and experience it properly. I'm like, dude, you're in Stockholm. Stockholm's great. So if that little weird anecdote tells you anything, it's actually like that somebody could go through that level of ridiculousness and isolation and still go away loving Nashville. Like, wow. I think that says something.
And
I
I think
to tell you that there is a storm coming our way. We had a massive hailstorm, and it's actually approaching my neighborhood now. So I actually have to leave because my family and I need to get in a closet. No double entendre or punning intended. It's literally our coat closet. So I'm going to go. But it was wonderful to meet all you guys. I hope you all come. I hope to be your professor. And sorry about the sudden exit. Okay.
Thank you.
stay safe, Terry.
Be safe. Bye.
Yeah, I guess I'd also add to Terry's answer that everybody's there's so many songwriters in the city. So actually in my neighborhood, there've been these weekly concerts, outdoor concerts that people who are normally touring, 200 nights of the year are giving, and that's been something pretty amazing to experience.
That sounds incredible. Yesha, you're in the dark.
I know the sun is setting, and this is and you can tell from the sunshine, I'm actually not in Nashville. I've actually spent most of my quarantine in Oklahoma, so I am not the right person to answer this question.
But do you miss Nashville?
I do miss Nashville. I miss Nashville. I miss the feeling in Nashville. I just miss the feeling in Nashville. So yeah, I definitely miss it. I live by myself, so I didn't want to spend that time by myself, and so I came, and so I'm here with my family in Oklahoma. And I can't cook worth a damn, so I didn't want to starve in my flat all by myself.
Well, it's 7:28, everyone. I think we've had a really great conversation. So thank you so much, Yesha, Daniel, for your insights. And Terry, if she was here, we would thank her too. For everyone who attended, I hope that you had some insight into this important discussion at Vanderbilt Law School, and I hope that you are leaving it with some added knowledge of what Vanderbilt is all about. But if you have any other questions that come up after the panel today, you're welcome to email our office, the admissions office, to ask those questions. I do want to remind students as well that if you haven't attended an admitted student program, please make sure to do that if you can. We love to see you at those programs and meet you virtually. But I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, professors.
Thank you, everyone. It was
Thank
so great.
you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Guys. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.